Pete Graff, candidate for 2nd District Supervisors. Thank you so much for joining us in studio today.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, good to see you.
I see you.
Let's just start by introducing yourself to our viewers. Just briefly explain, who you are, what your background is, where you live right now, all the basics so they can get to know you.
Basic background, keep it kind of short. Little synopsis on me is we moved into Tehachapi in 1979. My father retired from LAPD, so we moved up from there. Became a Tehachapian and stayed that way. I had a business for over a decade. The economy hit where we got really hit kind of hard. So it kind of slowly just kind of went under. We tried to keep it alive as best we could, but with the economy, it just wasn't feasible. Became a police officer, had a great time doing that, canine handler, trainer, everything else. It was great. Currently, I'm a watch commander for a contract federal agency out at Edwards.
And I know because of your background in law enforcement, public safety is a key issue for you.
Oh, absolutely.
Let's talk more about public safety. That's also something you ran on back in your 2022 campaign.
Correct.
For this District 2 seat.
Yes. Public safety, it's imperative. We have to address it. We have to start at the ground level, though. A lot of people, the last time everybody ran, we had the tax measure, and everybody was, happy with it, discontent with it, but we needed more deputies. So it was kind of a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound, if you will. We need to address more rock bottom, where it begins, the catalyst. Because a lot of our problems now, they're drug related as far as thefts. The catalytic converters on vehicles, petty thefts from stores, simple burglaries, door check burglaries on vehicles, door checking on home burglaries. Those are simple burglaries. And I would venture to say, without statistically speaking, probably 8 times out of 10, those burglaries or those thefts occur to support some type of addiction, and that addiction is drugs or alcohol. We have a huge fentanyl problem right now. Throughout our nation, but here in Kern County, fentanyl and methamphetamines is a huge issue. That needs to be addressed. My training and experience, when you bump into issues like that, you have people that usually suffer from some type of trauma. So when they suffer from trauma as a child, they grow old, and then they suppress this trauma with some type of addiction, whether it be alcohol, whether it be drugs. They usually start at home. With the addicts, they start at home taking from family members and taking from people close to them because chances are they're not going to call the cops on them. Then once the family members have had enough, they venture out into the community. That's where the door checking begins, the simple thefts. Those addictions need to be addressed, and that's where we need to start prioritizing our budgets. And what I mean by that is mental illness, because a lot of these people have these traumas. Those traumas need to be addressed. If we can address those traumas, we can start addressing a lot of those addictions. When we address those addictions, we can start addressing a lot of the thefts. And then homelessness is inclusive in that. Those traumas we have shelters in the county. There's places where people can go. But those shelters also have rules and regulations, and those rules and regulations stipulate you cannot come in intoxicated or high. So they choose this life. They choose this life to stay out on the streets as opposed to going to a shelter where they can seek care. It's the addiction. So we have to start at the root cause, the catalyst. What is it? It's most of the time is some type of trauma that they've suffered throughout their life, and then the addiction, then the theft. So if we can kind of handle those in that order, we'll be successful above and beyond what we'll ever think.
How bad are those issues specifically in District 2? Because obviously each district includes parts of Bakersfield, and we know Bakersfield is kind of the epicenter for a lot of the issues that you talked about. But specifically in District 2, especially areas like Taft, Maricopa, Boron, the more remote areas too, how bad is kind of these public safety concerns and also homelessness?
Well, it's bad everywhere. You will find homelessness throughout the county. When you start speaking of Taft, Maricopa, specifically Eastern Kern County, Mojave, Boron, the Cal City area, Roseman, those areas, they have more of, it's what you'll see in the metropolitan area like in Bakersfield, you'll see homeless across the streets. What you'll see out in the rural areas is more of an encampment. So they'll have encampments, they'll come together, and they're usually all addicts with some type of addiction inside there. So they come together as small little communities. And those communities, they really wreak havoc on the local citizens because they just basically take over properties, they take over land, and they build these encampments. And then you have a huge problem above and beyond that, environmentally speaking. Now you have human waste. Now you have whatever paraphernalia that's been discarded in those areas. So we now have a bigger problem with these encampments. So again, we have to go back to the root cause. We have to start healing these traumas, that these people have suffered. Then we start with the addiction, then we just keep going forward.
So we talked about the root causes, like you said, and emphasized are very important. But what about response to all of that? When it comes to law enforcement response, what's lacking in the district?
What's lacking, unfortunately, is the men and women who are able to respond to it. The sheriff's department is still down on numbers, even in the detentions aspect, as far as the sheriff's deputies on streets patrolling those areas, they still lack staff. What we need to do is start focusing on bringing people in, and we are. There's good turnouts for tests, and there's good academy turnouts, but the turnover for academies is pretty high. You start an academy with 50 cadets, you usually graduate in between 20 to 25 because there's a high turnover rate, which is, it's bad and good because we want the best of the best out there, right? We don't want somebody who just barely made it. We need somebody who can handle it. So we need to bring more deputies in. We need to focus on generating that revenue where we can bring these deputies in, and then we need to focus on retention of these deputies, county employees in general. We need to focus on retention, and that's keeping them here. How do we do that? I have a couple plans that I'm thinking about.
Share them with us.
Well, you know, I mean, one of them is, I would like to see our county employees, specifically first responders, but all county employees, you know, because a huge part of their paychecks go to retirements, elective retirements, but the big part of those paychecks, they go to insurances for their families. I would like to see, and I would draw up and propose that we offer Medi-Cal and county insurances for everybody, even, you know, people who live here, undocumented people. Why can't we work on something where we make this an elective for our county employees, where they can come in and they can seek this county insurance as opposed to paying for their elective insurance, and then they can pocket that money. They will be miles ahead as far as their income. And even if I can get this passed and we can do something like that, you know, just to show that, you know, it's acceptable and it's great programs that receive great medical, I'll take the insurance myself when I'm supervisor. You know, I mean, I'll be more than happy to take it with them just so I can lead by example.
And I know you mentioned the budget earlier, just kind of like diverting the funds, making sure they're going to the right places, the proper places. During the 2022 debate, again, when you ran against the former supervisor directly, as well as Kelly Cardin, who's a fellow candidate this time around, you mentioned that we need to divert funds back into the community.
Yes.
So when you said that, I'm just curious kind of the meaning behind it. Where do you feel like the funds are being used right now then?
Well, I feel that there's a lot of waste. Without babbling for hours here, there's a lot of waste. We do need to start prioritizing certain funding for certain things, and a lot of them is, and I'll go back to the problem where I was discussing the criminal activity throughout District 2. We need to start diverting those funds back into programs where we can have drug diversion, alcohol addiction programs, and work with the churches and work with these folks so that we can have facilities that these people can come to. And that's just not drug addiction and alcohol. I'm also speaking of veterans with PTSD, PTSI, with, you know, post-traumatic injuries as well as disorders, and first responders. Places they can go to where they can sit down collectively as a group and they can speak to one another. Because, and I'll speak as a first responder, you really can't seek help. And that's the tragedy of it, because once you start seeking help, you kind of get this red flag within the administration that you may or may not be able to do your job. I don't believe in that. I just believe that these first responders who see trauma all the time just need somebody to talk to. And these groups, I feel, would be a great addition to our communities throughout District 2, throughout the county, is really where it needs to happen.
How do you persuade the county board of supervisors of all of this? You know, especially, I know District 5 is also in the November ballot, so it's TBD whether Kim Salas or the incumbent Leticia Perez will hold her position, but regardless, the future colleagues of yours potentially, they've been on that board for years and years and years, right? And so you are the newcomer, you bring these issues, how do you persuade them that you need those funds?
Well, in those funds, who's going to deny that? Who's going to deny our first responders and our county employees needing additional financial help? Who's going to deny veterans and first responders additional? Who's going to deny that we need to address trauma with mental health? And who's going to deny we need to address drug addiction? I mean, I'll sit down and talk to them, but if they have a point where they can actually say this is not going to work, I would love to hear it, because this is exactly what we need. We have to start from the ground up when we start repairing things.
And going into other issues very relevant to District 2, oil and gas. The former supervisor was very tough on Sacramento when it came to the oil and gas industry. He was very protective of it. Where do you stand? What is your position when it comes to oil and gas here in Kern?
Well, one of the things we actually had to do in the last election was there was a measure as well to tax folks. I would love to start generating more fracking, more oil drilling, so that we can bring back that revenue. Kern County has, in my opinion, two major sources of revenues, and that's going to be agriculture and oil. So with those two things, we need to focus on those. Those are our huge revenue sources. We need to go back to the drawing boards when we start speaking to people like CalGEM and CAR. When we start speaking to these people, we need to reiterate, this is our source of revenue without taxing our citizens to death. Taxes don't need to be implemented. Something we had to do it with the measure back in 2022, but that was, like I said, that was a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound. We need to go back to our original sources of revenue, which is oil, fracking, and drilling. So we just need to be persistent when we're speaking to these folks. And when you speak to the oil companies around here, the folks who are doing the fracking, the folks that are doing the drilling, let's make sure that everybody's in compliance so that when we do address these organizations that we have to go to, we have no speed bumps. We are 100% clean, and we do what we need to do, and then we start generating that revenue again.
What if the state argues, though, as it is doing now,
Sure.
that you can transition to clean renewable energy and still, have business, still have money and revenue generated through that? What is your response to this transition they're encouraging?
I have no problem. I don't want to call it a transition, but I have no problem with green energy. I do have a problem like with the solar fields that they're putting up in eastern Kern County without beautification, without dust restrictions. I have a problem with that. I have a problem with these solar fields being within certain set amount of miles within residential areas. There's lung infections out there. There's valley fever caused by these solar farms. We have these huge windmills, which is great, but they, again, need to be in areas where they're just not this huge distraction, if you will, away from the beautiful environment. So I have no problem with it. They just have to be in the appropriate areas. So green, I have no issue with. We just need to persuade these folks that oil is a necessity. It goes in everything we're doing. It goes in our shoes. It goes in this floor. It goes on that wall. Everything that is pretty much created that has any type of plastic to it, any type of rubber to it, that's going to require oil. And when you start killing those fracking rights, those lease rights, when you start killing those, you are now generating a cost that is now more for the consumer. It's not an effective way to go.
And you mentioned that we don't need the taxes. Can I just ask you to clarify that point? Because the taxes generated from the oil and gas companies is what then the county uses for our various county services.
Sure.
So is it those taxes you're saying we don't need?
Absolutely. I mean, because that's like I said, agriculture and oil. Those are, in my opinion, those two are two major revenues that come into our county. If we can start more fracking and more oil drilling, then we can, I would love to dissolve the measure so that we don't have to pay these taxes, but we have to do one step first. We have to take that first step, and that's trying to generate these fracking rights, these oil leases, so that we can start generating that oil and generating that revenue. But unfortunately, until we can persuade Sacramento that that's necessary, we're going to have to absorb these taxes. And I hate that, because I am absolutely opposed of future or current taxes. But we also have to be able to provide first responders and county resources with some type of budget so that we can maintain our county.
Are you very much a kind of government hands-off where you don't need to be
What do you
guy?
mean?
I'm just curious about the taxes, right? They obviously go back to the government, and then they go back into kind of public needs, public works. But I'm curious, when you say you really don't want some of these taxes, that kind of led me to my next question.
Sure.
Of how much government interference are you for?
You know, government can be a good thing. In our current status, it is not. We are overtaxed, and we the people don't have a voice. And I think that's been lost in translation, because we the people, we are in charge. My constituents, the residents of 2nd District, the residents of Kern County, those are my bosses. I work for them. And I think that's been lost in translation with the current political environment, is now the politicians are in charge. And that is not how it needs to be. And as far as taxes, I would love to, yeah, absolutely. We can generate revenue and dissolve them, absolutely. But we need to reverse that mindset as far as citizens, specifically here in Kern County, reverse that mindset and remind our county supervisors, remind our CSD members, remind our city council members that they work for us. We don't work for them.
In other areas, the former supervisor really emphasized that he wanted District 2 to be a leader on was, business in sectors like carbon management, renewable fuel production, innovation, aerospace, et cetera, et cetera. Again, those are issues that District 2 almost uniquely deals with. Where do you stand on issues? I'm going to ask specifically about aerospace.
Well, aerospace, it's great. I mean, when you're speaking, specifically Eastern Kern, I mean, we have the Mojave Airport out there, which has, multiple businesses as far as aerospace goes. Edwards, North Edwards. It is a great thing, creates a lot of jobs. So yeah, we need to focus on that. We need to build up more in the Eastern Kern County. We have 3 major roadways that go through Eastern Kern County, and aerospace is a great thing, but I see adding above and beyond that. I see adding warehousing, logistical companies, and utilizing these freeways in these mass areas of land where we can put in warehouses, create jobs, and bring those jobs to Eastern Kern County. Aerospace is great. We need to keep that going, and we need to build on that as well, but we also need to think a little bit outside the box of the one pretty thing in Eastern Kern County, and then start focusing on the rest of Eastern Kern County and generate that revenue and generate those jobs.
You mentioned that, you're not the only candidate to say you feel like District 2 has been underrepresented, right? And many parts have felt like their issues have not been addressed. We've talked about public safety, we've talked about oil and gas, even aerospace. Are there any other issues that you are seeing in the area that, again, you think, wow, District 2 really needs to work on X, Y, and or Z?
How much time do we have? I was actually, for the last few days, I was out in Eastern Kern County, Roseman, Mojave, talking to folks, and spoke to hundreds and hundreds of people. And there's a big concern for jobs. There's a big concern for crime. There's a big concern for the seniors. And I have a soft heart when it comes to my elders. They've done their time, and I think we need to respect them, and we need to assist them in the rest of their lives. Social Security is a train wreck right now. These folks are trying to live from $700 to $1,400 a month, which is absolutely ridiculous. And once they start earning this Social Security, it's hard for them to gain any other types of benefits. So they have to sit and weigh and measure, what exactly do I need in my life? That is unacceptable to me. I spoke to a couple ladies in Roseman yesterday. They're caretakers. And when they caretake for these folks, they actually have working days, but outside of their working days, they go to the store for these people. They give them rides. I would like to see a more of a type rural transit upgrade in Eastern Kern County for our citizens. I understand nothing comes for free, but I would love to see it for free, but something budget-wise where these folks can get to appointments, where they can get to the stores, simple buses that work in the area. We have rural transit, but I would love to see that upgraded a little more, and a little more accessibility for our senior citizens. I feel like they're really unrepresented right now as far as the seniors go, and I think we really need to step up for them. That's one of my bigger things out there.
And you and I know that the Board of Supervisors is a nonpartisan office, but in many ways it technically still is partisan. The current makeup of the board, as we understand it, is 3 Republicans, and then you have Leticia Perez as the sole Democrat. Supervisor Scrivner was known to be the most conservative supervisor on the board. So again, and so is District 2. District 2 is known to be a more conservative district in the county. How do you appeal to all voters and people of any political background, any party background in the district?
Well, let me say this. When I was a police officer and I showed up on a call, I showed up nonpartisan. I had to hear both sides. I had to hear the arguments, who assaulted who was the aggressor, who was not the aggressor, who's the victim, who's the suspect. So I was nonpartisan out the gate. I am a conservative Christian, I am a Republican, but that being said, when I'm sitting on that seat, adding the 4th conservative to there, I won't be partisan. I'm going to be what's best for the 2nd District and the residents of Kern County. I'm not going to have the mindset of, well, this is my personal agenda. That's not going to sit in my mind.
So that is your promise, but I'm curious, again, how you appeal to the board, how you appeal to the voters, when the reality of nowadays is the voters and politicians themselves may immediately just kind of go to the politics, go to the partisanship. How do you work with those people?
You have to come in with that mindset that I spoke of in the beginning. I'm nonpartisan. When I arrive on scene, whether you call it a call for service or you call it the Board of Supervisors, when I arrive on scene, it's going to be nonpartisan. It has to be what's going to be, benefit my constituents as well as Kern County as a whole.
And as you knew from the get-go, jumping into this race, right? It's a very short time period for you. You got to make yourself
Sure.
known. So, Pete, what does campaigning look like for you in the next couple of weeks?
It's busy. I have an extremely busy schedule, getting out and setting appointments. And because it is such a wide district, we spoke of that. It's a huge district. So getting from east to west every other day, sometimes once a day, you have to work both sides. It's a challenge, but it's a challenge I've taken on. And it's a challenge that I'm going to excel in once I become supervisor.
And what takeaways do you have from your run in 2022 that you were perhaps, carrying over into this run?
What I took away from there was a lot of the people's concerns, throughout the district. They're still there. So we still have to address these. I mean, it's not like 2022 went away. We still have the same problems. We have a few more deputies on the street. We have a few more firefighters and a couple of new engines due to the measure. But we also need to keep pushing the issues that are still alive. And that's mental health, that's drug addiction, that's crime, and that's retention of our firefighters and sheriff's deputies and county employees. Those are still all major topics.
And Pete, that's it for me, but when it comes to your campaign, when it comes to your platform, any other issues, any other topics that I missed?
No, like I said, we just need to focus more. I've said it before, we need to focus more on the elderly. We need to focus on folks who are, financially struggling so that they can get to appointments, so they can seek employment, so they can get to doctor's appointments. We just need to really focus on the folks in the rural areas that aren't receiving the love, if you will. For years, they haven't had it, and it's time that changes.
Alrighty, well, Pete Graff, candidate for District 2 Supervisor, thank you so much again for your time today.
Thank you so much.